The year was 42 CE. The sun beat down on Jerusalem, baking the stone city under a sky of cloudless blue. The air hung thick and heavy. The streets teemed with life. Pilgrims, their faces etched with piety, shuffled through the crowds, their sandaled feet stirring up dust. Merchants hawked their wares, their voices a raucous symphony of commerce. Roman soldiers, their armor gleaming, patrolled the narrow alleyways. Their presence was a constant reminder of the iron fist that held this holy city in its grip. Jerusalem was a city of shadows. Beneath the vibrant tapestry of daily life, a deep unease festered. The Jewish people, their faith tested by centuries of foreign rule, yearned for a savior, a Messiah who would shatter the chains of Roman oppression and restore Israel to its former glory. The air crackled with anticipation. The very stones seemed to whisper of rebellion. Towering above the city, a beacon of white marble and gold, stood the temple. The heart of Jewish faith, its sacred courts thrummed with a palpable energy. Here, amidst the smoke of sacrifices and the murmur of prayers, the fate of nations was decided. The Temple Mount, a vast platform of stone, was a hive of activity. Priests, their white robes billowing, hurried about their duties. Levites sang ancient hymns, their voices echoing off the polished walls. The air was thick with the scent of incense and burnt offerings. Animals destined for sacrifice lowed softly in their pens. The faithful, their faces etched with piety, pressed forward, eager to offer their prayers and sacrifices to the one true God. The temple was a refuge, a place of solace and sanctuary. But even within its sacred walls, the tensions of the outside world were impossible to ignore.
The arrival of Paul of Tarsus, it changes everything.
Yes, but we must be careful. His teachings are radical. I feel a mix of fear and excitement. What should we do?
In the bustling marketplace, just beyond the shadow of the temple walls, a different kind of commerce took place. Here, ideas were traded as readily as spices and silks. Philosophers debated in hushed tones, their words punctuated by the clatter of passing carts. Scribes, hunched over their scrolls, meticulously copied ancient texts. And in the cool shade of a fig tree, a group of men engaged in heated conversation. These were no ordinary men. They were the leaders of the nascent Christian movement, their ranks drawn from the very heart of Judaism. At their center stood James, the brother of Jesus, his brow furrowed in thought. Known for his piety and wisdom, James commanded respect from both his followers and his detractors. Beside him stood Peter, the fisherman-turned-apostle, his weathered face a mask of concern. John, the youngest of the disciples, listened intently, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. The air crackled with unspoken tension, for they had gathered to discuss a matter of grave importance, the arrival of Paul of Tarsus. Paul, a former persecutor of Christians, now proclaimed himself a follower of the Way. His conversion, a tale as dramatic as it was improbable, had sent shockwaves through the early church. His fiery sermons, his unwavering conviction, had won him converts across the Roman world, but here in Jerusalem he was viewed with suspicion. To many he was a dangerous radical, his teachings a threat to the very foundations of their faith. Paul strode into the marketplace, his dark eyes flashing with intensity. He was a man on a mission, driven by a force he barely understood. He had come to Jerusalem to share his vision of a faith that transcended the narrow boundaries of Judaism, a faith open to all, Jew and Gentile alike. But his message, however well-intentioned, was a firebrand in a tinderbox, for it struck at the very heart of the delicate balance that held the early Christian community together. The meeting was tense. James, ever the pragmatist, understood the dangers posed by Paul's teachings.
The Jewish authorities, already deeply suspicious of this new sect, will not tolerate any challenge to their authority. To preach openly to the Gentiles, to disregard the laws of Moses, is to invite persecution, even death.
Peter, torn between his loyalty to Paul and his fear of the consequences, remained silent. Only John, his youthful idealism undimmed, spoke in favor of Paul's vision.
We must not be afraid. Paul's vision is one of hope and inclusion. The message of Christ is for everyone, Jew and Gentile alike.
Paul, his voice ringing with passion, defended his actions.
He spoke of his conversion, of the revelations he had received, of the universality of Christ's message. He argued that the law, once a path to righteousness, had become a yoke of bondage, that salvation was now offered freely to all who believed, Jew and Gentile alike.
His words, imbued with the fire of conviction, hung in the air. The fate of the early church, the very future of Christianity, hung in the balance. James listened patiently, his brow furrowed in thought. He respected Paul's zeal, his unwavering commitment to his beliefs, but he also understood the political realities of their situation. The Jewish authorities would brook no opposition. To push too far, too fast, was to risk everything.
Paul, I plead with you to be cautious, to temper your message, to respect the sensitivities of our Jewish brethren.
Paul, his voice softening, acknowledged James's concerns. He had no desire to court conflict. His only aim was to spread the good news of Christ's salvation to all who would hear it. Paul, I understand, James. I will continue to preach to the Gentiles, but I will also observe the Jewish customs, demonstrating my respect for the law. It was a fragile truce, a temporary bridge across a widening chasm, but it offered a glimmer of hope in a city riven by conflict. But the peace was short-lived. Word of Paul's teaching spread like wildfire through the city. Rumors, fueled by fear and suspicion, painted him as a heretic, a blasphemer, a threat to the very fabric of Jewish society. The temple authorities, their power threatened, moved swiftly to silence him. As Paul taught in the temple courtyard, a mob descended upon him, their faces contorted with rage. Stones flew through the air, each one a missile of hate. Paul, his body a canvas of pain, was dragged from the temple, his cries for mercy drowned out by the roar of the crowd. James, alerted to the commotion, rushed to the scene, his heart pounding in his chest. He watched in horror as Paul, his body broken and blooded, was dragged through the streets, his life hanging by a thread. Roman soldiers, alerted to the disturbance, intervened, rescuing Paul from the clutches of the mob. Fearing for his life, they spirited him out of Jerusalem under cover of darkness.
Move quickly, Paul. We must get you to safety.
Paul, wounded in body but unbroken in spirit, was escorted to the coastal city of Caesarea, where he would await trial before the Roman governor. Jerusalem breathed a collective sigh of relief. The troublemaker was gone, but the seeds of discord had been sown. The fragile unity of the early Christian community lay shattered. And in the hearts of those who had witnessed the events of that day, a deep unease lingered. The Roman eagle, its talons sunk deep into the flesh of Judea, had triumphed once more. But for how long? The confrontation between Paul and James had far-reaching consequences. It highlighted the deep divisions that existed within the early church, divisions that would eventually lead to its split into separate Jewish and Gentile factions. Paul, his message of universal salvation, would go on to become the apostle to the Gentiles, his letters forming the bedrock of Christian theology. James, rooted in the traditions of his Jewish heritage, would continue to lead the Jerusalem church, his influence shaping the development of early Christian thought. The clash in Jerusalem was a microcosm of the broader conflict between tradition and change, between the old ways and the new. It was a reminder that even within the most devout of communities, differences of opinion can ignite into flames of discord. And it stands as a testament to the enduring power of faith, a faith that could survive even the most bitter of divisions. For in the end, it was the message of hope, of love, of redemption that echoed down through the centuries, not the stones that were hurled in anger on that fateful day in Jerusalem.